Welcome to Coffee with Carrie. I've been begging and pleading for a long time, reminding everyone to bring their curiosity as a must-have accessory to every single date, but still some people struggle to keep this in mind or to remember what we talked about once they're in the moment. There's a lot to know and a lot to remember, I get it. I've given you questions in this guide, always available by clicking the link in my description box. And there's a whole playlist with episodes full of topics called Conversation Starters. Today I thought we would break down the most important key pieces of first date conversation to something very brief, super simple, a basic little cheat sheet, if you will. If you're inclined to hear more about this, I hope you'll stick around because that's what's on the agenda. FYI, number 5 is my big hit. It's everybody, you need this one. So don't click off early. You're going to need it in desperate situations if you're out there dating, but it only makes sense really to start with number 1. Number 1, you're allowed to talk. You're supposed to talk, but people will tell you that third story in a row and be thinking, what can I share next? Well, first of all, kudos for the fact that you're sharing stories, it seems, and not just creating an incessant stream of one question here, one answer, one question. So I love that. You just need to give yourself a break. It's not your job to carry the conversation for the two of you. Maybe you're doing this because the other person seems kind of quiet or shy, so you want to pick up the slack, or maybe awkward silences make you uncomfortable. You know what? It's not your job to be MC, and this isn't your TED Talk. A good fix for this is to ask somebody to share a story with you. See what they come up with. If it's literally 2 sentences and they can't even pull together a little anecdote from when they first got their job, or when they first became a parent, or the most outrageous thing they did in college, well, then maybe they're just not into it, and you can take a deep breath, look at them as if you're continuing to wait for more, and allow that uncomfortable silence to make them talk. This may seem cruel, but it's not. Why should you be doing all the work? Number 2, getting carried away in your performance of the me show. It's a natural happening for some people, but you need to remember to come up for air also. Your audience didn't pay for this one man or one woman show, and the cost of a whole evening of you and your life story is just kind of too steep a price to pay when dates are so hard to come by. Both people were interested enough to make the effort. You both took the time to get ready for this date, and you both actually showed up at the same place at the same time to get better acquainted. This is probably due to nerves. Some people either become very quiet, and others come down with a case of what's been referred to as, conversational diarrhea. It's okay. You can fix this. We don't have to ruin the whole date just because there's been a 20-minute run-on sentence. Take a deep breath, take a moment, let yourself be in that silence for a bit. Ground yourself for a second or two, and then, if you want to, apologize for monopolizing the conversation if that's your style, and ask a really great question, or maybe suggest playing a game where you can both answer one of the 33 questions. Gamifying a date totally changes the vibe immediately. Number 3, 60-40 is easy to remember. It's actually not an aim. It's not a goal. It's definitely not a rule. It's probably not even possible. It's more of a vibe you're looking for. It's something you can bring to mind throughout your time together to remind yourself to just check in with yourself. Have I been a conversation hog, you might ask yourself? Am I learning good stuff about this person? And that leads me to number 4. Ask, am I allowing the spotlight to shine on this other person and giving them a starring role in this date? The most important thing you can bring with you to these first dates is your curiosity and the willingness to let somebody else share with you who they are. You have to relinquish the spotlight and make somebody else feel important and like you're truly interested, or there's not likely to be a second date. It's totally understandable and predictable, actually, about how this happens. It's a lot of the same reasons for the other issues. Nerves, not getting out of the house enough lately, relishing the joy of human interaction and conversation. But none of that really matters. You have to fix it, and you can do that by truly being interested in who this person is. Not faking it, but really allowing your curiosity to come front and center. When you're really listening, you don't have to work hard at all. follow-up questions come really naturally out of what the person said, and you'll suddenly find it easy to engage them and bring forth some of their most interesting stories so that you can learn, maybe even expedite learning about whether they're a person you even want to get to know better. Number 5 is a gem, and it was created many years ago. Number 5 is my break glass in case of emergency trick to save a date that's been derailed and gone off the tracks in some crazy direction. It's a simple phrase, and you might want to jot it down or make a note in your phone, because at some point, if you're out there dating, you're going to need this. Let me give you an example. A client of mine was on a date with a fella who during that afternoon had closed on his condo. As she explains it, everything went wrong at this closing. Obviously, this was on his mind. It had occupied his entire day, and he was off on a tangent for over an hour, replaying the events of this transaction. She tried asking questions about his place, wanting to know what it was like, if it was the first place he'd ever purchased, about the neighborhood, but it just kept going negative. She remembered that a month or so prior, she and I had had a conversation, and I had her write down this one simple phrase. And fortunately for her and her sanity and the date, she remembered it, and she used it in this situation, and it was this. She said to him during the briefest of pauses, "You know, something you just said reminded me of this fantastic trip I took to Timbuktu." I don't remember the details of her vacation or where she went, but the phrase was, "Something you just said reminded me of." Not to pat myself on the back, but it's freaking magic. Former clients have reached out to me months after our matchmaking journeys ended and told me that they've been able to transition it into business situations, into family holiday conversations. I don't know, it's genius. And the beauty of it is that nobody can argue that it isn't true or accurate. You're stating something based simply on how your brain processes information, and you may, in fact, just have a weird little brain. How did this story about closing points or Platt's survey trigger her to think about coral reef or an exhibition on the ancient burials or French fries served with vinegar? Who knows? Who really understands how their little weird brain works? But nobody can say that that just didn't happen in here. And she was then able to ask him something about his most recent vacation, and suddenly the train was back on the track. Now let's recap, because I know I especially got so verklempt over my fabulous number 5 tip. Number 1 is take the pressure off yourself by asking for stories. Number 2 is closing down the me show and then gamify the date. Number 3 is periodically reminding yourself of the 60-40 rule. Number 4 is sharing the spotlight and being truly curious and tapping into your very best listening skills. And number 5 was my secret sauce cure-all to revive the conversation when it's on its very last leg. And now I'd like to recommend you downloading my 33 questions down below and checking out this playlist of conversation starters, and then planning a date for next weekend so you can practice everything you learned here today. I appreciate you stopping by. Please subscribe to the channel before you leave, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Until then, have a good one.